Tonight, election 2024 enters the final 3 weeks.
We are nearing the home stretch, but here's the thing. This is going to be a tight race until the very end.
We are going to win the whole ballgame.
The latest in the race for the White House. Plus, the United States is demanding better humanitarian conditions in Gaza. We break down the deadline for Israel to comply. And
their health is much better off, both our mental health as well as our physical health.
How getting more sleep can help you build a better immune system. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris heating up the campaign trail tonight in an election still too close to call. Good evening from the CBN studio in Washington, D.C. I'm John Jessup. Well, the race for the White House is now a sprint with just 3 weeks to go until Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump both found themselves campaigning in the key battleground of Pennsylvania last night, where the state's 19 electoral votes could decide the winner. CBN Washington correspondent Michelle London has the latest from the campaigns to the polls. Michelle.
John, early voting is already underway in certain areas, including Georgia, one of the Sun Belt states that play a big role as the race tightens. On the campaign trail today, Trump talking about the economy in Chicago before a rally tonight in Atlanta, as Harris met with black business owners in Michigan before her town hall in Detroit. New polls tonight continue to show both candidates neck and neck.
We have some hard work ahead of us, but here's the thing also, we like hard work.
We win Pennsylvania, we win the whole thing.
Both candidates hitting the battleground of Pennsylvania Monday. Trump honing in on immigration and inflation.
More people tell me about grocery bills, where the price of bacon, the price of lettuce.
Harris is looking to court black voters while acknowledging a bit of a battle garnering support from black males.
Black men are no different from anybody else. They expect that you have to earn their vote. And that's why I'm out here doing the work that I'm doing.
On the GOP side, a September poll found Trump has seen his support among women, especially in swing state suburbs, weaken since leaving the White House. As November 5th inches closer, early voting is already off to an aggressive start, with reports of some 5 million Americans taking advantage across about half the country.
More likely Democrats are voting early than likely Republicans. But check this out. Republicans have actually picked up their pace from 4 years ago.
ABC Washington bureau chief Rick Klein says both campaigns are spending massive amounts and contacting supporters across the country. The latest Ipsos poll revealing 62% of people across 7 major battleground states have already been contacted by one of the campaigns. When it comes to voter assistance, it shows both candidates are offering the most help in voter education, with a slight lead in Harris's favor.
Things like helping people register or figure out where to cast their ballots. That's nearly 10 percentage points more than, say, the Trump campaign.
The former president continues to gain favor among rural voters, while Harris's support remains strong among women overall. Still, much of the focus remains on battleground states, where a few thousand votes could make all the difference. And tonight, vice presidential candidates Vance and Walz also on the move, as both are campaigning at rallies in Pennsylvania. John.
All right, CBN Washington correspondent Michelle London. Thank you so much, Michelle. Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. David, welcome. So polls show this race is a dead heat. David, 3 weeks out, why is the race tightening so much?
Well, look, ultimately, we have a divided country, and so it makes sense that this is going to be a very tight race. I mean, that's ultimately the bottom line here. However, for Kamala Harris, John, the trend line is not good for her. Her favorability is down 3 points in the last month. Her real clear politic average that used to be over 2 points is now down to about 1 point or so. And there's other factors as well. Look, ultimately, John, this race is going to be decided on gender and education. On education, it's all about Kamala Harris winning college-educated voters. Donald Trump does better with the non-college educated voters. When it comes to gender, Kamala Harris winning women, Trump winning men. I will note, very important, John, when Trump won the White House, he won men by 16 points. When he lost to Biden in 2020, it was even. Now he's back up to plus 11 advantage with men. So that's good news for Trump.
So as you just mentioned, Trump is doing better in the polls with women, but both campaigns clearly have work to do. We see Harris appealing to black men and Trump needing to pick up more support from women. David, what can they do with just 3 weeks to go?
Well, it's going to be hard. Look, they're going to do what they have to do in the battleground states. But here's the issue for Kamala Harris. She cannot rebuild the Obama coalition. In other words, more black votes, Hispanic votes. Of course, you'll have your white votes in there as well. But the black, Hispanic, the minority vote, that isn't quite working for Kamala Harris as well as it did for Obama or Hillary or even Biden. She's underwater, or I should say, she's not doing as well as those three. She's still winning. She's still beating Trump with black voters and Hispanic voters, but the margin is much smaller. So she's going to have to rely on college-educated white folks in the suburbs to basically make it through, and that means the abortion issue is going to be very important for her.
So Ted Cruz will face off against Colin Allred for a debate in the Texas U.S. Senate race tonight. David, why is this race getting so much attention right now?
It's a bit of a head scratcher. Remember, Texas is red, but it's a bit more light red than it used to be. That's part of it. In other words, the demographics are changing. And also Chuck Schumer and the Democrats and the senatorial fund there on the Democrat side have put over $100 million into this race. And plus, you've got Colin Allred basically working as more of a moderate in this campaign. He's kind of positioned himself that way and kind of distancing himself from Kamala Harris, especially when it comes to the border down there in Texas. So you put all that together, and Ted Cruz has a fight on his hands. He's expected to win, but it's going to be close.
David, real quickly, the legal fight over the election is already in full effect in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin is standing by his executive order purging suspected non-citizens from voter rolls, but the DOJ filed a lawsuit citing the timing violates a federal law for removing voters within 90 days of the election. David, we just have a few seconds left. I know you spoke with RNC Chair Michael Whatley. What did he have to say?
I'll give it to you in 12 seconds or less. Michael Whatley, the RNC chairman, says, in essence, it is election interference, and he's very concerned that the Justice Department is getting involved in this to begin with, but especially just less than 30 days before an election.
Someone needs to pay you extra for getting it in 12 seconds. David Brody, CBN Chief Political
I'll
Analyst.
ask for it.
Thank you so much for your time, David. Well, now to the Middle East. The U.S. is demanding Israel improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza within 30 days, or risk the suspension of American military aid. In a letter addressed to Israeli leaders on Monday, Washington said the IDF is holding up truckloads of American aid at the Gaza border, casting doubt on Israel's earlier commitment not to restrict humanitarian supplies. Israel denies a blockade in Gaza and said today it ultimately will make its own decisions about national security. Well, Brad Bowman is here.
We listen to the opinions of the United States, but in the ultimate analysis, we'll make our own final decisions based on our own national interest. That's always been the case.
Meanwhile, signs tonight that Israel's war against Hezbollah is escalating. The group's acting leader vowing to strike deeper inside Israeli territory. This as the IDF ramps up strikes in southern Lebanon and northern Gaza. Well, Brad Bowman is here with us now. He is the senior director of the Center on Military and Political Power at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome to you, Brad. So talk to us about the timing of this letter coming on the heels of the U.S. sending that THAAD missile defense system to Israel.
Yeah, no, the letter came just a short time after the Biden administration's announcement that it was going to be sending this terminal high altitude area defense system to Israel to help protect it against yet another Iranian ballistic missile barrage. That deployment is a very significant statement of U.S. support for Israel and its ability to defend itself and will prove helpful. And then on the heels of that, as your question suggests, comes this letter. This is a sweeping letter that is quite specific. And in terms of the broader timing, we have to be honest, we're in a presidential year. And the Biden administration is trying to do two things at the same time. They're trying to provide Israel the means of self-defense. Admittedly, they've slow-rolled some of that assistance, but have provided a ton, while simultaneously trying to help address humanitarian conditions in Gaza.
So as you alluded, the U.S. supplies Israel with those bunker buster bombs that it needs to take out underground facilities. How would an embargo affect their war on Hezbollah's underground tunnels and underground compounds?
You know, Israel is confronting an adversary in the Islamic Republic of Iran as terror proxies that is implementing a multi-decade campaign to exterminate the world's only Jewish state, a state roughly the size of New Jersey. They're being attacked from 6 or 7 fronts. Israel is the most formidable military in the Middle East. It's incredibly capable, and Israel has a robust defense industrial base and defense technical sector. But with all that said, Israel is heavily dependent on U.S. security assistance, namely weapons. And so the goal of terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah is to use human shields and use humanitarian suffering as a tool of political warfare to try to deprive Israel of the means of self-defense for the ultimate purpose of exterminating the Jewish state. It's as simple as that, and what we're observing is part of that.
Do you see any likelihood that the U.S. Would include defensive weapons in the embargo, such as the interceptor missiles used for the Iron Dome?
In the letter sent by the U.S. Secretary of State and Defense, it specifically cites a section of U.S. law that links the provision of humanitarian assistance to the provision of weapons. So the statute is there, and they're threatening to use it if some of their demands are not met. So this is very, very serious. This, I would say, is not unlike your best friend being surrounded by 6 or 7 bullies on the playground, getting kicked, and then you come up and instead of giving your friend a hand up, you join the kicking. This is not too far from that. So this is quite extraordinary. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll see the Israeli government listen to some of these concerns and take additional steps above and beyond what they're already doing, and this will never happen. But they're specifically citing something in U.S. law that would move this forward.
All right, Brad Bowman with Foundation for Defensive Democracies. Thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Well, now to the aftermath of Hurricanes Milton and Helene. New safety measures are in place tonight for FEMA workers in North Carolina after threats of violence allegedly made against teams working to bring relief to residents there. Police say 44-year-old William Parsons made the threats while armed with a rifle and a handgun. Parsons is now out on bail after being arrested on Saturday. The incident follows the spread of online misinformation about FEMA's response to the storm. Meanwhile, signs of hope in the region. Water services have returned to parts of Asheville, North Carolina more than 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene, and crews have restored power to most Florida residents. Well, CBN's Operation Blessing is bringing critical aid and hope to hurricane victims in North Carolina and Florida. To learn more about it, visit ob.org. Promoting communism in America? What some call China's creeping influence in classrooms. When Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Western spy agencies say China is conducting espionage at an unprecedented scale. The Wall Street Journal reports Beijing is mobilizing security agencies and private companies to spy on the West. One example, just last month, an FBI probe found that a Chinese-backed firm hacked more than 260,000 devices, including cameras and routers, in the U.S., Britain, France, and elsewhere. As Western spy agencies struggle to contain China's actions, American leaders are urging businesses and individuals to be wary of their dealings with China. Well, you've likely heard of the Chinese philosopher Confucius, but what about Confucius classrooms? Based on a curriculum designed and funded by China's Communist Party to indoctrinate students in American schools into believing that China is not a tyrannical country. And as CBN's Dale Hurd reports, with these courses being taught in more than 500 public schools in the United States, some warn America's youth are being targeted with Chinese propaganda.
China is believed to have spent at least $17 million establishing Confucius classrooms in 143 school districts across the U.S., teaching school children Beijing's view of the world. Confucius classrooms are the public school version of Confucius Institutes, Chinese government-financed cultural programs that operate on college campuses, like this one at George Mason University. But while Congress has cracked down on Confucius Institutes by targeting their funding, experts told the House Committee on Education and the Workforce that Confucius classrooms are operating with little or no oversight.
This is an issue of national security. When you look at the indoctrination going on in our classrooms from several different perspectives, this is one of the most heinous.
What they want to do is influence our children into believing that, no, it's a good system and China is a normal country that is not tyrannical.
Confucius classrooms are presented to school districts as cultural exchange programs and the chance to learn the Mandarin language. But they're a project of the Chinese Communist government, and they teach young people the Chinese Communist Party view of politics and history.
So they will not talk about sensitive issues such as what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989. They will not talk about Taiwan, or when they talk about Taiwan, they will use the official version to say Taiwan is a province of China. You know, it always and always will be.
And China is offering schools big money. Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Fairfax County, Virginia, has reportedly disclosed that it's received at least $1 million in donations through the Confucius Classroom program. Nicole Neely, president of Parents Defending Education, also warns Confucius classrooms are operating near 20 military bases, influencing the children of American military personnel.
To your question about the military bases, we don't know what is happening, and that to me is the most frightening part. Who are these employees? What do they have access to? And what is going back and forth, both going into the minds of our children and then what data is flowing out of these?
That's a concern because Confucius classrooms also give the Chinese government access to data about the schools and the students. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Quality sleep, one of the keys to good health. What you need to do and not to do to get a good night's rest. Right after this. Well, in medical news tonight, some good news. Overall, the United States seems to be getting healthier. Data from the Centers for Disease Control shows post-pandemic Americans' life expectancy is on the rebound. And while 1 in 4 Americans are overweight, obesity levels are no longer rising. In addition, the American Cancer Society reports cancer survival rates in the United States have increased 20% since the mid-70s. Well, one way to improve your health is to get quality sleep. Research shows people who don't sleep enough are 4 times more likely to catch a cold than those who do get ample rest. Here's CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson with some tips on how to get a good night's sleep.
Scientific evidence shows that how much we sleep directly relates to our immune system function. Getting plenty of Z's helps repair just about every system within our bodies.
When people get the sleep they need, they're more productive, they're more creative, they are better partners, they're better parents, they're more empathetic, and their health is much better off, both our mental health as well as our physical health.
Most adults need about 8 hours a night to feel refreshed and ready for the next day.
And on the shorter end, like when we get less than 5 hours, that is certainly a risk factor for lots of negative health outcomes.
Anxiety often creates a barrier to sleep. People who struggle with this should consider preparing for bedtime a full 2 hours before lights out. That means moving from work, news, and electronics to something more calming, familiar, and pleasant.
Oftentimes people treat themselves like they're computers, that you can just flip the off switch and then go to sleep. And that's just not how the body works.
Setting your alarm clock so that you wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekends, is a useful tip to help gain control over when our body naturally gets sleepy, also known as circadian rhythm.
One of the things that happens with insomnia is that people try to adjust their wake time based on how their night was, right? So like they have a bad night of sleep and they'll sleep in an extra 2 hours. But what that does is it throws the whole system off. It actually puts you in jet lag without having any of the benefits of traveling.
If you often toss and turn in the middle of the night, try getting up and moving to a different location like the couch. That can help your brain not associate anxiety with your bed, something called conditioned arousal.
So, you have your angstiness and your bed, and you need to break those apart and wait until you get sleepy again. So you don't want to turn on all the lights. You don't want to do anything really active. You want to go back to those relaxing things that are known to kind of bring on that sleepiness for you. And when you begin to feel sleepy again, you kind of repair that relationship so that, over time, when you get back in bed, the bed does what it's supposed to do, is cue you to fall asleep.
Exercise during the day tends to help us sleep well. So does a dark room that's a cool 65 degrees. On the other hand, things that can get in the way include caffeine and alcohol, which can suppress important dreaming or REM sleep.
The other thing that alcohol does is it's relaxing, right? It hits on those receptors in our brain that make us feel relaxed, but it wears off. And when it wears off, your brain notices, and that also leads to more awakening.
Also, try to avoid sleep medications and other aids.
Even if many of them are not physiologically addicting, they become almost immediately psychologically addicting, right? We start to wonder, can we sleep without these? And so it's a slippery slope to go down.
Lastly, head off worrying in bed by setting aside time during the day to make a list of your problems and the first step towards a solution. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Tips. Thanks, Lori. Still ahead, a new set of furry diplomats arrives in the United States. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, the wait is finally over as Washington welcomes a new set of pandas to the nation's capital. Back in May, China announced that it was preparing to send a pair of giant pandas to the National Zoo. Today, the three-year-old pandas arrived at their new home in special FedEx trucks, marking the first time Washington, D.C. has welcomed a new bear pair from Beijing in 24 years. It is a continuation of a giant panda conservation program between China and the United States. The panda pair will spend about 30 days adjusting to their new home before making their public debut, and I gather a lot of people will be packing to see them at the zoo. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.